Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Boy, do I have a story here. This is a big story. This is a story about corruption and intrigue. This is a story about the Scottish Government using and abusing its authority, bending its will over a supposedly impartial civil service to get its own way, and to cast blame elsewhere, to manufacture grievances with Westminster, and to generally show itself up to be a wonderful organisation that is doing the best for Scotland, while in actual fact being a terrible organisation that is doing deliberately the opposite. Some of you will be expecting this to be the big story of the day. Let me tell you, this is a big story. This isn't the big story of the day. That is still to come. But this story will show you partially how corrupted the SNP government of Scotland has become, and it goes to show how much of a cancer it is, because it metastasizes from beyond just the SNP into the whole of Parliament and into the whole of the civil service. And I think you'll agree at the end of this video that the civil service in Scotland is no longer fit for purpose. John Paul Marks should be fired, and everyone in a senior position should also lose their jobs and be replaced by someone who isn't corrupted by the malign influence of the SNP. And as I say, this isn't even the big story of the day. Do like and share this one. Do hit the subscribe button. You won't want to miss what's coming, but you certainly won't want to miss this story either. Let's take a look to see how bad it's getting at the heart of darkness in Holyrood. Here goes. Now, we all know how bad Shona Robinson is, a woman with an IQ of 86, thrust unwillingly perhaps into a role she is ill-suited for, and one for which she is entirely unsuitable. She's not clever enough, she's not wise enough, and she is so inept that every single thing she does in that role is wrong. And it damages Scotland. Not just damages Scotland now, but damages Scotland for years, perhaps generations to come. A woman that should in no way be allowed authority based on her inability to do any kind of responsible job. And yet here she is, failing in that job and having to get the entire civil service to cover her up and cover up her ineptitude. Political meddling SNP Special Advisor demanded that the Scottish Government civil service blame Westminster for huge funding cut. A decision made by Shona Robinson to cut money for the Clyde Gateway because they've literally got no money, because they've spent it, wasted it, blown it on other pet projects, on other wasteful projects, or on pointless things like pretending embassies and 40 or 20 mile an hour road signs and sending officials and ministers all over the world pretending to be important people. And when they've realised that they've spent all that money and they don't have any left because, you know, they're like children in a sweet shop, they went, who can we blame? Shall we blame ourselves? No, we can't do that. Let's blame Westminster. Yes, but nobody believes us when we keep saying let's blame Westminster. So now they're trying to coerce and bully civil servants who are supposed to be impartial into blaming Westminster. And the fact that civil servants are going along with it shows that the civil service in Scotland has been infiltrated by malign SNP influences, and at that point ceases to be a civil service and simply becomes the administrative arm of the SNP, and is therefore no longer fit for the purpose in which it was designed and must be replaced. Certainly all senior civil servants in Scotland are now besmirched and need to go. The SNP have been blasted for political meddling and of attempting to stoke more constitutional grievance after a special advisor demanded that the UK government be blamed for Shona Robinson's decision to cut Clyde Gateway funding. Her decision, let's blame Westminster, because, hey, you can't blame Shona. She's too stupid to take the blame. There are monkeys up trees with more intelligence than Shona Robinson. of course, she was only put in place by Hamza Yousaf, a man hardly noted indeed for himself for having much by way of the little grey cells. The SNP have been blasted for political meddling after a taxpayer-funded special advisor demanded a Scottish Government civil service blame Westminster for a brutal funding cut. The media officer was told to include a line pointing the finger at the UK Government instead of admitting fault. Now, the very fact that that media officer then did this means that media officer must be fired. He's acting in a party political way, not for the benefit of the people of Scotland, which is his job. Critics have claimed that the nationalist attempt to stoke constitutional grievance was an attempt to distract from its own major financial failings. Well, of course you're going to get financial failings. You've got Shona Robinson in charge of finance. Old 86 can't cut it. The row revolves around the removal of funding to the Clyde Gateway when a printing error was blamed for getting the organisation's hopes up. Yes, they said it was a printing error. It wasn't. It was deliberate. It was there. That was in the initial draft. And then they said, oh, no, God, no, we can't afford it. Let's pretend it was a printing error and let's blame it on Westminster. Because what we can't possibly do is accept that we are a bunch of useless, corrupt buffoons. Which, of course, they are. The Sunday Mail reported that Clyde Gateway expected to get $5 million in the government's 2024-25 budget, but were actually scheduled to get $500,000, with an error in the document being blamed. BS. It led to officials being lambasted by the Finance Secretary, Shona Robinson, who demanded to know how this happened, with it eventually being put down to human error. Numerous media organisations asked the government to comment on the situation, with the press officers outlining a draft response to send to them, saying it was a human error, mistake kind of thing. But they were ordered to add in a line blaming the UK government for the removal of funding when it was, of course, no such thing. Because when the UK government hand over their money, vast amounts of money, according to the Barnett formula, they do not specify in that where the money must be spent. It's basically just a huge bag of cash. Go on, you've got the right, you can spend it how you like. And they do. They cut funding to the NHS, they cut funding to schools, they cut funding to the police, they cut funding to transport, they cut funding to infrastructure. The only department that got an increase in funding at the last budget was independence. The one thing that the people of Scotland don't actually care about, and this has been proven time and time again. And whilst Nat voters do want, independence and nationalism, even they don't put independence at the top of their wish list. NHS and education are the top two. And indeed, across the whole of Scotland, independence is 6th, and amongst SNP voters, independence is 4th. But nobody cares. Nobody in the SNP cares what the voters want. No. Screw the voters, screw the people of Scotland. We'll spend it where we want and then blame Westminster. It's easier. Numerous media organisations asked the government to comment on this situation, with the press officers outlining that draft, as I say. Anyway, and there's the letter. I'm not going to do it. I'll just hold that there for a moment. I'm not going to read all those names because there's a million of them. But, hi, redacted name. Can we explicitly mention the 10% cut to our capital budget from the UK government, please? Thanks, from redacted person. With huge polls, please consider this version moving forward. However, blah, 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 blah. And then it's the explanation of why they're trying to blame and why the cut was there. No capital budget allocated to Clyde Gateway in the coming year. However, we'll work with Clyde Gateway and other partners to mitigate the impact, blah, blah, blah. Nothing really there. Hi, redacted. I'd be very grateful if SPAD consideration of a line agreed with officials to meet your request for comment from the Sunday Mail issue. They are working on a story about Capital Gateway claim and promised £5 million of funding. Blah, blah, blah. They said it was only going to be £300. Then some names redacted. And so basically what they're saying is they wanted to tell the truth. The civil service wanted to tell the truth. But this SPAD said, no, we have to have a meeting. And at there, he said, no, we can't tell the truth. The truth would make us look like a bunch of fools. Let's lie and say it was the UK government cutting funding, when it was no such thing, because the UK government do not issue specific areas of responsibility. Like I say, it's just a bag of cash. So it is sheer and utter BS. No one can believe a word they're saying. It is Shona Robinson's inability to do her job. She made the cut. It was originally 5 million. They cut it to 500,000. Then said, "Oh, printing error," but it wasn't. And then said, "Well, rather than this being like your inability to do your job and spending money on things you should be spending it on, then not having the money to spend it on things you should be spending on, let's blame Westminster." Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. It's always Westminster's fault, isn't it? The trouble is now they used the Westminster argument so many times that no one believes it. And that's why they're having now to corrupt the civil service. Nobody believes the MSP, the SNP. Everything, of course, is it's Westminster's fault. Is it raining? Yes, it must be Westminster's fault. You know, was I speeding, officer? Yes, First Minister. Oh, it must be Westminster's fault. Conservative Party Chairman Craig Hoy told the Scottish Daily Express, "This further exposes the SNP's political meddling in the civil service. It is wholly unacceptable that a nationalist spin doctor ordered a government press officer to include a line in response to a media inquiry that was designed deliberately to stoke constitutional grievance." And he's right. And it is just typical of the SNP to point the finger at Westminster because that woman, that moron, is incapable, totally incapable of doing her job. And in fact, in that picture, you see 3 morons totally incapable of doing their job. Every time I look at Shona Robinson, all I see is someone very low IQ, not much going on, and just look at the eyes. They are the eyes of the village idiot. She hasn't got a clue. She's out of her depth, and she's now getting the entirety of the civil service to cover her arse. She needs to go. The civil servant in place who did that needs to go. The special advisor needs to go. And all senior civil servants in Scotland need to be fired because they are complicit, because this isn't the only thing. I'm coming up. If this was the exception or a one-off or something very unusual, you'd put it down to stupidity or desperation. But we see this thing time and time again. This isn't accidental. This is a whole deliberate ploy now to corrupt the civil service, to do the will of the SNP, and to lie, effectively lie for a political party at an official level, because that political party is in of itself so corrupt, inept, stupid and criminal. The people of Scotland deserve better, and it just goes to show the depths to which the SNP can sink. And boy, can they sink. And that's why you want to hang on for the next video. You'll see exactly how bad they are. Anyway, I'll round off there. Thank you very much for watching. Please hit the like button. Please hit the subscribe button. You won't want to miss the next one. Until then, take care, and I will speak to you soon. Goodbye.